There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello BookTube, I'm Sean the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel. Here I am with my 2023 Women in Translation Month TBR. This is a wonderful bookish event on social media that's been going, I'm not sure how long. It was started on Twitter or in the blogosphere by Metal Radzinski, if I'm pronouncing her name correctly, and I'll put a link to her blog in the show notes. And it has been on BookTube at least for 6 or 7 years. There's been a week-long or 10-day-long readathon version of it that has been put on by Kendra Winchester and others in years past, but that is not happening. But Women in Translation Month is still happening autonomously, and here I am to tell you with great excitement of my TBR. Now, there's one or two, I think maybe only one, that was on my TBR last year as a maybe, and I didn't get to it. I think actually my copy of the book didn't arrive in time, but I have it now. And that is the French-Canadian novel, The Tin Flute by Gabrielle Roy, translated by Alan Brown. This is a little bit of a beat-up copy, and you know what? I went hunting through boxes of books I had at the farm, and I brought a more pristine copy back, so I think I might read it, but I might read this and keep the other one on my shelf. Anyway, Sean, get on with it. Gabrielle Roy, born in a French-speaking community in Manitoba, St. Boniface in 1909, died in Quebec City in 1983. And this is a Canadian classic. It was originally published Bonheur d'Occasion in 1945. The translation is 1980. The lives of a working-class Montreal family in World War II. Here is a novel from Tibet by a woman that I just found out about, ordered a copy, and I ordered it to a local bookstore to give them some business. I could have ordered it from Amazon, so I just thought, don't have to always order from Amazon, and they got it for me within 2 weeks. I was very pleased, and you can see that transaction on my vlog that's either going to be coming up or has just been posted. Anyway, Sean, here it is. It's called Flowers of Lhasa by Tsering Yangkyi, translated from the Tibetan by Christopher Peacock. And it is about 4 young women thrown into the seedy underbelly of Lhasa, the sacred Tibetan city. Tsering Yangkyi, born in Tibet in 1962. Flowers of Lhasa is her first novel. When it was published in Tibet in 2016, it was the second novel ever published by a Tibetan woman. I am currently reading a collection of short fiction by a Tibetan writer, Tsering Dondrop, that I hope to finish before the end of July. It's awakened a deep fascination with Tibetan literature and culture and history. So I'm going to follow my bliss. And I didn't know about this book, and this library copy of this book is in such good condition I'm not embarrassed to show it. This is an Inuit novel. The Inuit peoples live in northern Canada. I won't embarrass myself by saying exactly where. Yeah, so I'm just going to leave my comments short until I bone up on it, but northern Canada, let's leave it at that. Including the northern Quebec territory of Nunavik. And this is the very first novel that was written in Inuktitut syllabics. And I don't know exactly what that is, but basically this is the first Inuit language novel, and it's been translated. I hope I can pronounce it properly. Sanaaq by Mitiarjuk Nappaaluk, and I will double check all those pronunciations. Translated from, okay, let's see here. No, the language is Inuktitut. Inuktitut. Translated, so this is a double translation. It was translated from Inuktitut to French by Bernard Saladin Dangleur, and then translated from the French to English by Peter Frost. That is amazing, and this will be the first time I've read a doubly translated book, and this is about an Inuit family dealing with Canadian genocide. The writer, Mitiarjuk Nappaaluk, died in 2007. She was about 80 maybe. And she was an accomplished cultural figure. Spent her life preserving Inuit culture, including writing 20 books, including this one, but maybe this is the only novel she wrote, but I don't know that for sure. She also compiled an Inuit language encyclopedia of Inuit traditional knowledge, which is freaking amazing. She translated the Catholic prayer book into Inuit and helped to develop school curriculum. It's a byproduct of colonial bullshit that I'd never heard of her. I'll read the first page, which is just 3 very short paragraphs. Chapter 1, the title is Gathering Dwarf Birch. A woman, Sanaaq, was getting ready to go and gather branches for mat making. This is what she did. Before leaving, she assembled a tump line to carry the load, her ulu to cut the shrubs, and a glove to yank them out of the ground. She also filled a small bag with provisions, tea, meat, and blubber, as well as her pipe, matches, and chewing tobacco. Sanaaq set out across a wide plain and then through a long stretch of foothills. She kept walking further and further from home, followed by her 2 dogs, Kajualak and Høeg. On the way, she saw some agigit and prepared to kill them with a few well-aimed stones. But the dogs ran after the birds. Sanaaq tried her best to stop the dogs, yelling at the top of her voice, "How, how, Kajualak, how, how!" Her shouting was to no avail, and the dogs continued to give chase. The ptarmigans flew off. Very much annoyed, she continued on her way and came to the end of her journey. Well, I realized because I just filmed my Patreon book haul video a few minutes ago, where I always read the opening paragraph, that I just automatically read that, but I don't think any of you regret it, do you? I thought that was quite fabulous. I won't do that for every book, just to keep the video short. Here is a collection of short stories from India, translated, I believe, from the Bengali. The author is Mahasweta Devi, and the title of the short story collection is Breast Stories, translated by Gayatri Chakravorty Spivak, who I attended a lecture she gave in Saskatoon in the early 90s, and my mum and I went. Spivak is a preeminent post-colonial scholar, theoretician, and we couldn't understand a word she said. And I'm not talking about her accent, I'm just talking about the level of academic jargon. I'm expecting better things or more accessible things from her translation of this. These stories are about sexism and misogyny. It's a cycle of breast stories. Mahasweta Devi was born in 1926. Joe Smith put me on to her. She died in 2016. Indian writer in Bengali and an activist. It was first printed in 1997. Very much looking forward to getting into this with Joe. Here is a book that I haven't heard anything about on BookTube, but I may not have been paying attention, but I've heard a whole heck of a lot on bookish Twitter, and that is the German novel or novella Marzahn mon amour by Katja Oskamp, translated from the German by Joe Heinrich. It's a Pirine Press book, and in particular, my bookish buddy Ronan Hession, the noted Irish novelist, and a guest 3 or 4 or 5 times on my channel already, loved, and in fact he has a blurb on the back. Shall we listen to the blurb? It's rare to come across a book of such captivating warmth and humor. I loved every page. It's about a woman in East Berlin who abandons her career as a writer to become a chiropodist. This, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this might be Annie Ernaux's most lauded book. She won the Nobel Prize in 2022, and this is the book that everybody says. And I've heard many people, I think one of them was Eric Carl Anderson, and I did take his advice. Don't start with this book, but this is her masterpiece. The Years, translated from the French by Alison Strayer. And this was published originally in 2008, and the translation 2017. It's very impressionistic about Ernaux's life from 1941 to 2006. Here's the Danish novel that came out in English translation this year. It was on my most anticipated 2023 releases. I've had it in my hot little hands since it was published, and I think that Women in Translation Month is the perfect time to read it. It is called Memorial, 29th of June, by Tine Høeg, translated from the Danish by Misha Hoekstra. The protagonist is invited to a memorial 10 years after her university friend August's death. And that's the opening premise, and it is written like this. It's not poetry, at least I hope it's not, but it's set on the page like that, so depending on the density of the prose, it should be a rather breezy read, but I don't need it to be. And I'm interested in the fact that some of it is got gray highlights, like this line, and most of it doesn't. So what's that about? Here's another example that shows that. And I haven't even heard all that many reviews of it since it came out. Maybe I'll be one of the very first ones. Here is a German novella that I rather half-assedly held up as the best, most beautiful cover that I've seen this year. I'm not really into beautiful covers the way I used to be. Am I turning into a straight man? I don't know. But this is a lovely cover. The novella is Siblings by, I think it's pronounced Brigitte Ryman. Translated from the German by Lucy Jones. And it's a beautiful, it's a physically beautiful book. It's put out by Penguin with French flaps. And it is also set in East Germany. 1960, the border has been closed, so it's at the very beginning of East Germany. I'm just skimming the synopsis. It seems like Elizabeth, the protagonist, a young painter, is pretty gung-ho about living in socialist East Germany, and her brother, Uli, not so much. Siblings. So if you noticed, many of these are quite short, so I might do better getting to most of them or all of them. Hey, well, it's a few days later, and I decided, this TBR's not done, not by a long shot, so let's continue. I'm adding possibly 4 more books, but that is not as crazy as it sounds. Hear me out. I'm going to add a couple short audiobooks, because I realized I didn't have any audiobooks for Women in Translation Month, so I've found 2 shorties. And what I'm going to start with in this addendum to my Women in Translation Month TBR is that as I was editing it, I realized, well, I think I realized it at the time, but I didn't give it much conscious thought, that I have 2 East German novels on my TBR, and I could read them one after the other, but I still think, let's keep those a little bit more separate. So I haven't decided which one I'm going to jettison, or which one I'm going to try first. Probably I'll try Marzahn Mon Amour first, and not get to Siblings until another day, to swap it out from a book from a different part of the world. And this isn't really, really different, but it is one that I actually have out from the library. And I thought, duh, Sean, you got this from the library because you wanted to read it. It's by a woman in translation. Let's just put it all together, shall we? This is a novella from Russia, The Accompanist by Nina Berberova, translated from the Russian by Marian Schwartz. Translation is copyright 1985. Oh, wait a minute. This is interesting. So I think this is possibly the second double translation on my TBR. I believe this was translated from the Russian by Marian Schwartz, and that was into French, and then into English by William Collins. And it's interesting, in the case of this book and the Inuit book, the first translator is the one named on the cover page, and you have to go into the weeds to find the other one. Why did I get this book from the library? It was not for Women in Translation Month. I found reference to this. I'd heard Nina Berberova's name, but that's it. And I was digging around for research on, genre definitions, genre comparisons between novellas, short stories, and novels. And I came across an article by a Canadian writer named George Fetherling from 2006, in which he writes about Nina Berberova and about from his point of view, I don't think I've ever come across this claim anywhere else, that the novella is essentially French. Berberova was a Russian writer who went into exile in France. She wrote in Russian, but was a celebrated writer in France, lauded, won all kinds of prizes in France, was more famous in France than any other country. I'm not sure that really gives a whole lot of credence to his thesis that the novella is essentially French. But anyway, in writing about her, and in particular about this novel, The Accompanist, my curiosity was engorged. No, Sean. My curiosity was piqued. Piqued, there we go. Not engorged. That's another video. Hang on. And this is about a professional pianist who begins to experience rivalry between herself and the famous soprano for whom she accompanies, and plot ensues. 94 pages. I guess it was originally written in 1936. Swap out one of the East German for an anti-communist Russian novel. That sounds like a fair trade. And this came in on interlibrary loan yesterday, so I thought, maybe I can squeeze this in too. This is a very slim novella from Italy, The Dry Heart by Natalia Ginzburg, and they've put the label right over the title. I cannot stand when libraries do that. This is the read-along for the Mooks and the Gripes podcast for their summer read. I have not gotten along with Natalia Ginzburg. I read one of her most lauded novels, Family Lexicon, hated it, bailed on it, thought it was really stupid. And I don't have high hopes for this one because this opens with a woman murdering her husband and plot ensues. And I mean, there's a lot of husbands need to be murdered by their wives, but I'm just not sure it's going to be a Sean book. But it's so short. It came in on interlibrary loan, and it's be fun to read the novella if I can get through it and kind of participate in the Mooks and Gripes read-along. So, translated from the Italian by Francis Frenet. All right, so the two audiobooks I'm going to try. One is, I remembered suddenly that I wanted to try a translation by a debut Canadian novelist, but she's translated several books from French to English, but her debut novel I loved. I read it about a year and a half ago. Wee Jane by Amy Wall, and she's a French to English translator. So I found one that's quite affordable on Audible called Prague. The author is Maud Villieu. The narrator is A.J. Bredel, and apparently there's two translators, Alicia Jensen and Amy Wall. It's set in Montreal, a bookseller and her lover dream of Prague. I don't need to know another darn thing about it. Let's find out a little bit more about the author. She's young. She was born in 1987, published fanzines, poetry collections, and Prague is her second novel. There you go. So I'm curious to try that one. And the other one is, have you heard about this new audiobook service that is really highbrow literary books and books in translation on audio? It sounds fabulously snobbish. I'm about to take out a membership, but before I take out a membership, I'm just going to buy this relatively affordable audiobook without a membership. The name of the audiobook service for the upper crust is Spiracle. I'll put a link to their website. Probably many of you have already found it. I canceled my Netflix because I don't watch TV, and I'm going to get Spiracle instead. Here is the book that I found there by the Norwegian writer Hanne Orstvik, who wrote Love, which is a novella I read many years ago, 5 years ago, something like that. I have a full review. And this is a more recent translation, Ti-amo. The audio narrator is Emma Fielding, and the translator is the same as translated Love, Martin Aitken. Passion, suffering, and loss. That's all I want to know. I can't wait. I've been wanting to read another book by Hanne Orstvik ever since, and now I'm gonna. So that's my additions too, and one of them is probably going to be a substitution for one of the East German novellas, and I'm all the more excited, and I hope I have just stimulated you up to your collarbones to join in the fun. Thanks for watching.